And we'll go ahead and get started. I'm Marcie Keithley, your host, and I am here to welcome all of you from all over the nation. And I think we have some other countries with us this evening. We've been doing this well over a year now, and our happy hours is where we talk about everything adoption. So we're just going to go ahead and just share a couple of little things with you first before we begin. A reminder that these calls are recorded. So at the end of this, we will record it and upload it to our YouTube station so you can watch it and share. And because we have a lot of new ones with us this evening, Jennifer, you want to show so we can talk a little bit about who we are. We are the National Association of Adoptees and Parents. We were formerly Indiana Adoption Network. We hold an annual conference in Indianapolis, which is scheduled for September 10th and 11th, and you'll learn more about that as we go at the end of the show. We do host this virtual support networking groups. We publish a quarterly newsletter that will be going out next week. We do a lot of partnering with other non-for-profits. We do have a community event calendar where you can see what's happening all over the nation if you follow us on our website. We do support adoptee rights legislation, and all of us are available to speak at any events. So again, we'd like to welcome all of you. Jennifer Falsing is also a board member, as well as Beth Story, who's with us this evening, and they'll both be helping us out in the Zoom room. So again, welcome everyone. So let's get started and meet our guest. This evening's guest is Paul Kimball, and he is an active musician, choir teacher, French hornist, and actor in Stockton, California. As a baby, he lived in foster care and was eventually adopted by a liberal Berkeley family in the 60s. He is married to Dr. Dominique Mueller Kimball, and they have two daughters, Ashley and Alyssa. So everybody, let's welcome Paul to our happy hour. Hey, Paul.
Hi, you guys.
Hi, Paul.
Hello. I'm finding a very similar experience right now to Reunion, where you're seeing people that you're related to and look like you. And in this case, it's all of us in the adoption tribe here. Besides, I think asking a couple questions at last week's chat, I've never spoken to this many adoptees in my life, so I'm deeply honored that you came. I'm going to tell you the story of my my adoption experience. What happened is I went to therapy, like so many of us do, and it was an adoption therapist who said, you know, Paul, you've got an unusual story and could help a lot of people if you wrote a book. I went, okay, I'll do it. I'll do it, because just that feeling of connecting with other adoptees helped with a life's purpose. So that's how We Are All Human Beings happened. You'll kind of get the whole book with this. I'm not gonna, leave things out. Just here's what happened. So here we go. I am biracial, half Armenian, half blonde hair, blue eye Caucasian. In 1961 in Los Angeles, an Armenian man named Vahe Farajian, and I love doing their accents. Vahe Farajian was at a church service in Hollywood where he sees this beautiful blonde young woman. So in my case, they were not teenagers, they were early 20s. And as Marcie said, I'm a musician, and I think it's so interesting that the very first thing that brought them together was music. They were singing along, and I think Wendy needed to help Vahe with the pages on the hymnal. And so therefore the flirtation happened, and they ended up in this wild romance. Now, Vahe had immigrated from Iraq. He and his entire family had come over, and he's the eldest of a four-person, 4 kids in the family, and then the 2 adults. So that was unusual. And he had his big, thick accents and everything like that. Meanwhile, Wendy, blonde hair, blue-eyed, fabulous cellist, already had made a name for herself as a concert cellist. Played on what is called Top Tunes and New Talents, which was an offshoot of the Lawrence Welk show. She did that when she was about 17, played a big solo called The Swan. And I guess they filmed her, and there is no film left of it, but she was there. I found that out, and she had told me that she got fan mail, etc. So anyway, this torrid love affair happens, and I think probably in secret at that point. The Faragians didn't seem to know about this, and I doubt that Wendy, her last name is Brennan, knew about this. So that went on, and Vahe would go and hear Wendy's cello recitals, etc. And all of a sudden, they're pregnant with me. And they had a problem. And it's hard to say that the first sign of life, which was me, the first thing you think of is a problem. But that's what it was, and that's what they had. So they're down in LA, and they decide to go to Mexico and have an abortion. Now, as you can obviously tell, I've obviously met both of these people. Wendy never mentioned this at all. Vahe told me right off the bat. So that's not the easiest thing to take, even though, as Marcie said, I'm from Berkeley. I am very hip, very, very liberal, very pro-choice. However, good Lord, am I glad I made it through that. So they went down to Mexico. Wendy got cold feet and couldn't go through with it. So they came back. Meanwhile, she's the only child in a pretty well-to-do family. Her dad was a lawyer for funeral parlors, etc. So he worked in that department. So I don't know the details of when she told him or told her parents, but they shipped me over to Northern California. If you know California, Los Angeles is in Southern California, and Fort Bragg is beautiful, beautiful by the ocean and redwoods up in Northern California. So if you were to drive it, gosh, it's probably, that might be a 10 or 12 hour drive just on both sides. And I think she knew somebody there. Meanwhile, in all of this time, I'm hearing the cello in the womb, most definitely. And it's funny because I'm a French horn player, and you just go, I wonder what the cello sounds like in there. Is it similar to a French horn player? But anyway, so she was up there, I think she said maybe 3 or 4 months, a young gal of 23, pregnant. Don't know what happened with the relationship, but Vahe clearly didn't know that she had gone up there. So somewhere maybe they broke it off. These are details I'll never know. But November 22nd, 1962, up in Fort Bragg, she has me. And I think, like so many of us hear about and talk about, you know, again, thank you, Marcie. Thank you for these courageous birth mothers to tell their stories. She probably was coerced to put me up for adoption. She did think about it. I had my original mother for, if I recall, it was 7 days in there, which of course I didn't know until finding out later. there was one day, I guess, out of the hospital where there we are. There I am with this person and bonding and perfectly happy, I'm sure. Her parents saw me, I guess said I was a beautiful baby or something, so maybe they came to take her. But anyway, she decided, I assume, to put me up for adoption. And I was adopted through, oh Lordy, I'm so nervous right now. Through Children's Home Society over here in California, specifically Oakland. She mentioned that she just didn't think that the Children's Home Society person had the right facial expression. It was a cold face, give us the baby, you know, which happens. So then we were separated. Writing this book, by the way, this was one of the hardest parts to write. So off I went to Oakland, which is about maybe a 4-hour drive. And Wendy went back to Los Angeles and continued with her cello, continued with it, ended up in France, ended up living, if you know classical music, she lived with Nadia Boulanger in Paris. Art Buchwald wrote an article about her called Peanut Butter in Paris, where he just described, here's this young lady from the United States studying and learning over there in cello in Paris. She got a wonderful review one time of, the reviewer had seen Barbara Streisand, Wendy Brennan, and one other person that weekend and didn't decide which was the reviewer's favorite. So she was making it with that. Meanwhile, I'm over there in foster care in Oakland, and I don't know who with. I tried to find out maybe 3 weeks ago, which then got me on the California bandwagon. Didn't know you couldn't find out who your foster parent was either. So there's that scene. In foster care, I was described as a happy baby who liked lots of attention. So that describes me, you know, pretty well. I'm a very active music teacher. I love to make the kids laugh. I love that whole world. So that describes that baby. Meanwhile, somewhere along the line, Vahe runs into Wendy, and I think he said her father, and just asked what happened with the baby. And they told her that told him that I had been aborted. So there's your family secret. We're keeping the secret. And I'm floating like Moses somewhere with Children's Home Society over in Oakland. Meanwhile, my Berkeley family, the Kimballs, Bob and Lorna Kimball, already had 3 natural children. Got an older brother, Seth, and then 2 sisters, Jeanette and Amy. And it was not your classic fertility issue or anything like that. Lorna, my mom, just didn't want to get pregnant again. And so they thought they would adopt a baby. So they went to Children's Home Society and did whatever you do, and thus ended up with me. Now, it's so interesting in this day and age how many of us are biracial or multiracial, but back then it was a big deal. And I was considered hard to place because I was half Armenian and half Caucasian. But my mom, Lorna, described it as love at first sight. And thus I came. Now, interesting, she mentioned that I was crying big time when she first saw me. So I'm absolutely a believer in that we babies, and it's great to look at you folks and say the we. We babies remember, we babies react, we babies have an awareness of what was going on with us, even if we didn't realize, obviously, the whole outer world of it all, but you realize you're not with your mom. So started growing up with this wacky family in Berkeley in the 60s. Now, interesting, and I don't know the answer to this. They adopted me at about 4.5 months, or I came to live with them at about 4.5 months. That's when they met me. And then you go through the process. And it was on my birthday, November 22nd, 1963, that the papers are signed. And if we know our history, you might be going, there's something about that date. They come home and they find out that JFK was shot that day. So I'm a little bit, with my adoption, a little bit Forrest Gump sometimes with some of these stories. Even the church, the Methodist church down in Hollywood where Vahe and Wendy met, parts of Back to the Future were shot there, and Sister Act and things like that. So anyway, so there I am with the family. Now, I was a super pudgy baby. My mom immediately put me on a diet and all of that. At about 4, and I have my notes here. Go to page 4. Here's my feeling as the baby with Wendy. So what I just described. Sorry, we're back in Fort Bragg. A decision, and I'm reading from the book, obviously. A decision was made to send the pregnant Wendy up north to Fort Bragg, California, in picturesque Mendocino County, and have the baby there. The structure of my book, dear readers or dear listeners, is I state what happened, and then anytime I have a feeling or an intuition or a pondering, I then put it in italics. So I said, next, this was the secret, this way the secret remained, and no one needed to know. And in italics, I wrote, I wonder who made the decision. Family pressure, a pregnant woman who needed to free her life from guilt and responsibility. It was now a family cover-up. And I put here, I don't know exactly where she lived in Fort Bragg for months leading up to my birth. She clearly was far enough away from the danger of being recognized with her rounded tummy and no husband. And then in italics, I ask a bunch of rapid fire questions. What is the relationship between a pregnant mom and an unborn child? Did she talk to me? Did she sing to me? Did I hear her play the cello, an instrument that I love so much? What does the cello sound like in the womb? Did I hear her laugh, cry, sleep? We spent 9 months together as a team. She was my first friend, my nurturer, my comfort, my home, my entire trust. How could I know that we would eventually be apart? About 4 years later, my dad wrote down a little story that I told, I guess, in preschool. I've got this organized. Excuse me just a second. There we go, page 13. So at 4 years old, and so this is what, 1967, I literally told my adoption story, and I called it Scream. So this is a little story this little baby made up. Now, every time he gets hurt, he screams. He found a pine cone, then he lost it. Then he found another one, then he lost it. Then he lost himself. So I think of the pine cone as my birth mother and then my foster mother. I literally said this here. He screamed and screamed for his mummy. He found a dog to take home, so he stopped screaming. He found a cowboy in the forest, then a wolf came home. The cowboy shot the wolf in the ear. A kid came and sang a song. They put the wolf in a pond. They followed a path to the other side of the woods. Flowers popped everywhere on the ground. They all smelled the flowers. Scream found a forest to take home and a turtle to take home. He found a house to live in, with all his newfound friends. So that little 4-year-old is telling his own story, regardless of whether he's aware of it or not. So meanwhile, I grew up in Berkeley. Crazy, wonderful place. Ended up doing the arts, a lot of arts. I was in dance class, though I wasn't very good. I was always in plays. Played my French horn to the heart's content in orchestra and band, took private lessons, had wacky, wonderful friends. Great friend of mine, James Heyman, he's a professor now. Dave Tull, Linus Lancaster, all of these things. I was in a wonderful Boy Scout troop, hiked all through the Sierras. All of that stuff happened. And yet, I did things that were abnormal, some self-harming things. Not big self-harm, but just hitting myself for no reason, for not knowing why. And I remember my dad getting concerned. And here I am now, and it occasionally happens now when things get too intense. Just that thinking there's got to be something wrong with me, therefore we've got to punish this person. So there's that flip side. Anyway, one day I am with my then girlfriend, wonderful violist, Rebecca Strauss, and we are listening to some music. And she brings out a cello album with Jacqueline Dupre, who's probably maybe could be argued the greatest classical musician that ever lived. And when I first heard that sound, it was beyond any Disney-esque beauty being moved. It was just completely moving to the point that I almost felt sick listening to it. I'm going to play you just a little bit of the Elgar Cello Concerto. And this tune, this da 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 dee da 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 dee dum bum bum, etc. That theme has been in my head in a way since then. When I get sad, when I get emotional, it's just there. So now here we go. I'm going to share screen and I'm going to press audio, and you'll hear about 2 minutes and see a video recording of Jacqueline Dupre herself playing this. And please somehow let me know if this isn't working. So I'm doing share screen. We got share sound. Doing this. You can see I've got notes to make sure that I talk about what I want to do. I'm going to move this over. And here it is. Here's right where that theme, it's first played in the orchestra, and then the cello takes over. So we'll listen to about 2 minutes of it. Were you able to hear that? Okay, great. And now I'm back here. So this is all working. Okay, great. Isn't that something? Isn't that something? If you've never heard that, I recommend listening to the whole piece right there. Again, I didn't know my mother was a cellist. Knew she was some kind of musician, that I had been told. Did not know she was a cellist. Became obsessed with the cello. Obsessed. And of course, this is back before YouTube. This is back before all of that stuff. I have so many Jacqueline Dupre records and other cellists, Mstislav Rostropovich, Pablo Casals, Paul Tortelier, have a little bit of him, who Wendy studied with. Just something about that sound. I ended up going to the University of the Pacific for college here where I live in Stockton, California. And some of my friends were convinced that I played the cello because I was talking about it all the time. The separation was hard for me. just to come to college. It seemed so far away, and really we're about 80 miles away. But anyway, it was something. And I want to say when that happened, I just went through something in terms of the search. And I know we all either search or we don't, but there is something that has that massive curiosity that maybe we know that we feel, or we're not aware that we feel, but it's there. It hit hard in college. It hit really hard. And I remember crying to my parents on the phone saying, I want to search out my birth mother, but didn't do anything about it, didn't know how to do anything about it, but it would just come. And again, I've got a great life, y'all. Really wonderful things. I played in an orchestra, the Stockton Symphony, for 27 years. I conduct my own orchestra. I do a lot of musical direction, et cetera, but that helps so much with the therapeutic side of the sadness that is there. So anyway, in college, like I said, I felt those feelings at UOP, and met my wife after college. We were both at St. Mary's High School. She was the drama teacher. I was for 1 year the band director over there, and we met. And so, you know, that's a whole side world. But anyway, got married. And it's that first baby that you have. So now I'm, 29 years old, I believe. And we have a C-section, not to be too graphic, but that foot, that first foot that I saw in the C-section is the first human being in 29 years that I'd ever been related to. Could not believe it. And then she comes out and she's got some blonde hair. Where did the blonde hair come from? Well, it came from a person I didn't know, but this is Wendy's, my birth mother's. It's a professional shot when she was playing with, it says it on the back of here, when she was playing with an orchestra in where is it? In Oregon. And this is about 2 years after I was born that this picture was taken. So anyway, that really gets you going, as we know. And then we had another child. You just start thinking about these things. You just start thinking about them. But life continued, and babies are being reared. And my wife at that point was the drama teacher. She ended up becoming a principal. She's a principal now during COVID, by the way. Imagine the sheer hell of that. But there she is. And finally, I don't know what it was that made me crack. I had to know. I had to let my birth mother know that I had turned out okay. As we know, this is before the internet. This is over 20 years ago, because how old am I? I'm 58 now. So probably around age 36, 37, I find out that you can contact Children's Home Society and they will send you this non-identifying information. I didn't know that. I didn't know. And so it comes, and I'm almost like an adolescent in some ways, just so scared. And I have to do so many things alone. And opening that letter, I had to do alone. And everybody's out of the house. And I open the letter, and it's describing Wendy, and it's obviously without the name, and describing the Armenian parents. And then I see that she's a concert cellist. And I could not believe it. I could not believe that my birth mother was a concert cellist, even though it made perfect sense because of everything that I told you. So I'm looking at my cheater notes here. So on page 41 of my book, I recopied from a journal that I keep off and on, especially when the big moments happen. So when the cellist that you just heard on the YouTube, Jacqueline Dupre, when she passed, I wrote a little tribute to her. Let me find this. Okay, so here I go. Reflections on Jacqueline Dupre, October 23rd, 1987. And keep in mind, this is 13 years before I knew my birth mother and before I knew that she was a cellist. Jackie died on October 19th of multiple sclerosis. She was 43, I believe. She has been and probably will always will be my favorite musician, the one that I listen to more than anyone else. I consider her one of my teachers, even though we have never met. I first heard of her when some fellow Berkeley High students were talking. They had seen and heard Schubert's Trout Quintet on PBS. Jackie Itzhak Perlman, Pinchas Zuckerman, Daniel Barenboim, and Zubin Mehta were the players. And then I talk a little bit about my hearing her for the first time, which I had described to you guys. I often, in some of my most emotional moments, the opening theme after the great introduction represents such painful longing. That theme we heard. Dee da da, da dee da 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 da. It reaches the opening theme after the great introduction represents so much painful longing. It reaches into space, searching for something. To me, it is so lonely. Perhaps I relate this to the loneliness I felt in college. I often remember going for long walks and thinking about this theme with her yearning tone and feeling sad, yet expressing the sadness, not just holding it in. My adopted mother, Lorna, would be proud. In my own playing, I hear her traits. I'm not as good as her. Don't even think that. But trying to achieve a personal tone, letting the wonderful stresses and phrases come alive, but most of all, trying to be absolutely free and deeply sincere in expression. Thank you, Jackie. I love you and I am grateful for your greatness. May you rest in peace, having lived a difficult but important life. And in my italics, little did I know that in a way I was paying tribute to my lost birth mother, my original musician, cellist. I felt sick with emotion listening to Jacqueline Dupre, but I didn't know the full reason. How could I? I was remembering Wendy's playing before I was born. So the search begins. Don't think I even knew the term search angels back then, but I got some books and they mentioned, I guess, organizations that would help you search. So I looked up one of them and the entire organization was a guy named Neil. And I don't even know who he is at this point. Maybe I'd have to search out Neil, but Neil was he was the entire organization. And I think again, it was Oregon. So Neil and I talked for hours on the phone, for hours, and he had some way of getting at information. I don't know how he did it. But at one point he says to me, "Hi, Frank Novak." I said, "Who's that?" He said, "You are." So he knew my original name before I did. Even though I don't think he was looking at the actual birth certificate, but he was looking at something that had the information. On that information also were the 3 names your birth mother, I guess, is required to give. I don't know about everywhere, but definitely on the birth certificate in California. So there were 3 names. Blackburn, Novak were the last names, and the other was Brennan. So we chased Blackburn for a long time. I would look up people maybe that I thought was it, and then have these phone conversations. You know, when you get yourself ready. Hi, my name is Paul Kimball, and we don't know each other, but I'm looking for my birth mother, whose name might be Blackburn, and that's your last name. You know, is it you? And sometimes I had wonderful, meaningful conversations with these poor strangers, and it just wasn't them, but they would say good luck. Meanwhile, I also know the name Wendy Brennan is there. So I go down to Los Angeles to visit my buddy, David Tull, and I think I had maybe one or both babies with me. I can't remember. But again, he's a professional drummer. He's in the National Music Union, AF of M, which I was in until I stopped being a Stockton Symphony member and really didn't need the affiliation. Well, no, I stayed with it later, which I'll tell you why, but I'm not in it now. And so I'm just looking through his union book. This is not looking on the internet or anything, or the computers, just looking through his kind of type thing. And there is her name right there, Wendy Brennan, cello, and maybe gave her age or the date of her birth or something, cello/piano. And I just went through indescribable emotions. But just there it was. After doing all of these things with Neil, there it was with two phone numbers. One was a Los Angeles number, one was a New York number. So I went home and started working up the courage for that week and called. I would call both numbers. One of them, the New York number, had some goofy, weird answering machine. I've never figured that out. And the Los Angeles number would just ring, and I would count to 10 rings and then hang up. And after about a week, the one that does the 10 rings, she answers. And I had my little speech planned out with her. I said, hello, this is Paul Kimball. I'm third horn with the Stockton Symphony. May I speak to Wendy Brennan? So right there, I let her know if she was going to hang up on me right there, that made me too easy to find. Good Lord, he's a horn player with the Stockton Symphony. Boom, you can find me instantly. And so she said, yes, this is, you know, whatever. And I don't know what I said. She thought I was trying to see if I could get her to play some chamber music or something. But I said my name that she would have given me. I said, does the name Frank P. Novak mean anything to you? And she says, it might. I don't know what I said after that, but she said, are you of Armenian descent by any chance? And when she said that, I said, yes, I am. And I think we both know who we are. Because why would a total stranger ask that question? So we talked for 3 hours. Musical talk about how I was born, etc. It was this very enlivened conversation. She had a New York accent. So I learned that she split her time between New York and Los Angeles with her cello duty. She played in the Chautauqua Symphony for years and years over there. So we just went through this, and I've never felt like that in my life, that being that whole. Had no idea what that was like, but it was just, the hole was filled. It was absolutely filled, and we had this marvelous conversation. I have a birth sister from another father, red hair, looks nothing like me, red hair, and she did not know about me. But anyway, we decide to meet. The elementary school where I was teaching, by the way, was on pins and needles, with this when I told them about this. They had been kind of following my searching, etc. So I go down by myself, obviously let my wife know. Got 2 young kids, didn't know what she looked like at this point. Maybe she described herself. I don't remember the details. But I guess it must have been on a Friday. I don't know. But I drove all the way down to Los Angeles, which is about a 6-hour drive. Dropped something off at a theater company for my wife. Came and found the freeway exit. Had to pee so badly, thought I was going to die. You know, so you make sure you do that. And then there is her condominium complex right over there off of Los Feliz Avenue. Go up, and it was just surreal. Walking down the hall and knocking on the door, and there she is. This blonde hair woman, maybe about 3 or 4 years older than I am right now at this point. It wasn't the gigantic hug. It wasn't the music. And yet there we were. And we were comfortable enough that I spent the night at her condo. I think it must have been 2 nights. And we talked about everything, and I got to see her amazing memorabilia, these beautiful pictures, promo pictures, the people that she'd played with. Again, if you're into classical music, young Wendy behind Arthur Rubinstein, the great pianist. Young Wendy with, either she sent this to me or I saw this, about to play a recital, and it's the mayor of Los Angeles sending his regrets from he and the missus that he can't be at that recital. Seeing all of these things. So as a classical musician, of course, this was the gold mine. I loved all this. Met my birth sister, who is clearly emotionally disturbed. There was no way around seeing any of that. But anyway, it was a party. We went to an Armenian restaurant. At one point, I just suddenly started crying because it was all so real to me. But it all happened, and 2 days later, came back. I drove back up to Stockton with the agreement that she was going to come. She and my birth sister, Raya. I'll tell you why later, by the way, that I'm actually saying their names. So anyway, that happened. Talks on the phone. She told me basically the name of my birth father, etc. And she came up to Stockton and visited, spent time with my in-laws, stayed there. We went over to Marine World, where saw the fish and everything like that. Brought our kids, went bowling. Raya came. We duetted a little bit on horn and flute. And then she went back. So things were going really well. But one night on the phone, and this is all in a 3-month period, keep this in mind, she flips. She absolutely flips and is crying and just said, if people find out about me, they're going to think she's a slut. And she just kept using that word and kept using that word. And I'm saying, we can get through this. Everything is going to be fine. She ends up going to her festival with the Chautauqua Symphony, which I think is a 9-week summer festival. When Stockton Symphony would do things in the summer, you could look it up and go, gosh, we played 1812 Overture the same night Wendy would have been playing 1812 Overture. But I called to wish her a happy birthday, and she was just stoic, and it was weird. And she clearly did not want to talk. And then I didn't hear from her. So she did, as we hear about in adoption land, she ghosted me, completely ghosted me. Met with Raya one time. She didn't particularly want to talk about her mom. We had a good time. But that was it. Didn't hear anything. But I still knew that she was between LA and between New York. Well, along comes 9/11. And what happened in 9/11, and I'm just freaked. What was she killed in 9/11? I don't know. I don't know. So I called. She didn't call back, didn't answer or anything, but she clearly heard my answering message, which was probably something like, "Are you okay?" In the meantime, by the way, I had written her a letter and said, "Whatever's going on, I'm going to keep the same phone number and you know how to get a hold of me." She then calls up my mother-in-law. And my mother-in-law quickly started writing down everything she said, which was, Paul has a good family. He must never contact her again. Must never contact her daughter, Raya, again. She felt like she was being stalked. And this is a person who would send me cards saying, "Love, Wendy," and excited about the grandchildren and all that. But the flip happened. Did all of that. That also was very difficult to have printed in the book, but there it was. And never see her again, ever. And I held to her wishes. I held to her wishes for about, I want to say, the next 12 years, but I would still keep tabs on her because she was in an orchestra. I could see what they were playing there, and I would still look up things about her. I couldn't, in my head, exorcise her, get rid of her. I would have dreams that she came back. And they'd be so vivid, and then you wake up and you realize, no, that didn't happen. But she told me enough about my birth father, just enough, that his last name was Faragian, that he had been in the carpet business. His first name was Gary. She got that wrong. But anyway, I think at that point, I finally had a little school computer and could look things up. So I looked up Armenian businesses, I think, or looked up Gary Faragian Armenian businesses, and it led to this phone number of a Faragian, I don't know what they were called, Faragian carpet cleaners or something, which were like these wonderful ornate Oriental carpets. Those are the types of things that they repaired and cleaned. So I leave a message with just enough information, and I get a phone call back, if I recall. Oh, and that on the answering machine was a wonderful man who kind of, very delightful Armenian accent, blah, 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 blah. He figured everything out. This was my birth father's young brother, whose name is Voskin. So Voskin and I at some point connect. I think I must have called him or something. And in that phone conversation, he had figured it out, because Vahe would occasionally pine for his old girlfriend, Wendy. He still would mention her, and Voskin figured it out. Oh my God, he must have gotten her pregnant. He didn't know, and this is this guy. Voskin is a hero. He was magnificent, and his wonderful wife, Tamar, we decided to meet. They were just in San Francisco, and I'm here in Stockton. San Francisco, on a good traffic day, is an hour 45 minutes. So I drive over to meet them, and he meanwhile had not told his brother. And we spent 8 hours together. They overstuffed me with Armenian food. I swear I'm still full now, and that's over 20 years ago. So they're showing me pictures. I got to see a picture of Vahe for the first time. And this was probably in about November I met Tamar's crying sisters and her crying mom, who have so much empathy. I never can say the word right. Empathy, right? Empathy, there it is. So they agreed that on Christmas Day, Voskin was going to bring a picture of me and tell the family that way, because they were all going to be together in LA. Meanwhile, I went with my wonderful, crazy Berkeley people to Alameda, where at my sister's house, we had Christmas, and this is before cell phones. I come home and the answering machine is doing its thing. The first was a happy birthday, or no, I'm sorry, a Merry Christmas from my drummer friend, Dave Tull. And the second is Voskin. And it was probably about after 11 at night. Paul, we are all going to stay up till 1 or 1:30 in the evening. We're excited for your phone call. Vahe knows all about you, and we look forward to hearing you call. So again, I let everybody kind of go someplace, I guess off to bed. We must have put the children to bed. And you work up the courage. I've got to make this phone call. This is it. I dial the number, and it's like at the most one ring. Ring, hello, Paul. This is Voskin. We're very excited here. Vahe would like to talk to you. So this is my birth father, who did not know I existed until this day. And he says, son, I love you. Now, I mean, what more do you want from that? So we talked, and it was lovely. It was lovely, and we agreed to meet. So 3 days later, I got on an airplane, and by myself. Again, my wife is finding about all these things, of course, you know, but by myself, which to me is very vulnerable. You're on an airplane, I'm suddenly theirs, and there's nowhere to go. So drop off, we fly over to Los Angeles at the John Wayne Airport, if I recall, a smaller airport. And there they are, Voskin, Tamar, their sister Anush. Aren't these wonderful names? Anush's husband, Levon, and there's Vahe Faragian looking totally like a disheveled Chico Marx. Just, you know, it's like he had been through hell and everything was there, but we hugged, we did the whole thing and went off to this fabulous party where I am just super shy and yet feeling all of this. And everybody wants to meet me. It is a gigantic deal in the Armenian culture because this does not happen a lot. And it did not happen a lot then. So I meet everybody. But meanwhile, Vahe, who I describe as a very eccentric man in an otherwise normal, extremely ethnic Armenian family, he takes me over when we go for a walk and immediately spills everything about the abortion and all of that. So anyway, that happens. We end up back at the party. I get to meet his wife, Rebecca, and there's dancing and all kinds of wonderful things. And I end up at their condo. So here I am in condo number 2, and it's about 1:30 in the morning, and myself, Vahe, and Rebecca just cried over what was going on. And they had lived most of the time in Lafayette, California, which is very near Berkeley, where I grew up. So you often wonder, did we pass each other on the street? Who knows? But anyway, that relationship continued for 12 years with he and the family until he passed. And if you're watching over there on YouTube, hello, we are still very much in contact with them. So now we cut ahead. By the way, for those of you that are wondering, I'm very aware of the time. As a teacher, I'm constantly knowing where the clock is, etc. So anyway, I would, in those 12 years, check my mail and get the Musicians Union newspaper or magazine, I guess, that came out once a month. And I would immediately check a section called Taps, where they let you know who's passed away. and I would look for Wendy's name and it never said it. And I would check the Chautauqua website, make sure that she was there. So that was going to be the way I was going to find out if she passed. Vahe passed away, and he was cremated, but before the cremation, down in Los Angeles, we got to go and see him, and there was this wonderful Armenian priest with this fabulous voice. What I did is I went to that Methodist church where they met and took a flower. And so at the before the cremation, there's his body and there's the priest and probably one of the workers. And I said, can I put this flower on him? And they said, absolutely. So I kind of reunited in my own way, Vahe and Wendy, with that flower. And Tamar asked me, what's it like being adopted? I said, you're just pulled between these two worlds. There's always this guilt for me. And again, this is why I call my book, We Are All Human Beings, Unadoptee Ponders. I'm just talking my own experience. People have different experiences. But anyway, there was that. So he passed. Meanwhile, I'm not seeing Wendy on the website. So at this point, Facebook exists, etc. So I look up another cellist who was in the section, and I didn't say I was her birth son, but I just sent this stranger a message and said, hi, I'm a friend of Wendy Brennan's. I see she's not on the lists anymore. Is she still playing with the orchestra? And didn't hear anything for probably 2.5 years, because it was in one of those little obscure messages in Facebook. I'm not Facebook friends with the person. Anyway, maybe 2.5 years later, I get this message from the cellist who says, oh my goodness, I just saw this. I'm sure you've heard that Wendy passed away 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago, whatever it was, in the fall. So I didn't know. Nobody told me. Saw that at night, and all of that hurt, all of the anger, all of the confusion, that whole world, it just was there in a whirlwind. And I took a walk and I didn't talk. My wife, was already asleep, didn't tell her. You wake up in the middle of the night thinking about these things. And finally, I think I told her the next morning and told my co-worker. So with that, wanted to find out more information, found out very little. There was no funeral service for her. She was an only child. Her parents had passed, and they had asked the Chautauqua people to not have, that there was not going to be any kind of service. So I found out where she was buried. And she's buried over in Los Angeles, even though she passed away in New York. So I went down to Whittier, California, to this beautiful Rose Hills, what it's called, not Rose Hills Cemetery, Rose Hills Park, anyway, and found out where she is, and looked and could not find any marker at all. And I finally got a worker and said, can you help me find her? And he phoned up the main office there, and they finally went, this plot right here with no marker, this is where she's buried. So this is a woman who, a reviewer gets as much pleasure from her as Barbara Streisand, who did all of these wonderful things in this orchestra, but in the end, there she was alone. And I felt everything at the same time, because you don't know what you're going to think when it's a brand new experience. I was angry that I was in this situation. I was hurt, but I was also relieved to know that after all of this searching and wondering, I finally knew where she was. So I went down to the office and said exactly who I was. I am her birth son. I was adopted by another family. Can I design her marker? And they said, sure, which I could not believe they said yes. So I designed it and put, I think our beloved mother, put the dates on there, a musical treble clef, even though she's a cellist, it should have been a bass clef, but they had a treble clef, a flower. And it took them maybe 3 months for it to happen, but there it was. And I didn't get a chance to see it until about a year ago. Oh gosh, year ago in February, I think it was. So when I saw the marker by myself, I ended up having just a little ceremony for her. And no one was around, but my car was right next to where she was buried. I'm probably going to butcher this, but let me grab my horn. I played a little piece called Shenandoah. Oh, Shenandoah, I long to hear you. Away, rolling river. Oh, Shenandoah, I long to hear you. Away, I'm bound away, across the wide Missouri. I'm literally shaking. I can hardly play, but I'm going to keep playing. And so that's what I ended up playing over at her thing. This is the second time, by the way, I've been so like this, I could hardly get a sound out, but that's what that would sound like if I was doing this. I also played on my car The Swan by Camille Saint-Saëns, and I want you to listen to it. About 3 minutes. You've probably heard it before, but this is Jacqueline Dupre playing this. So in other words, I'm back with the cellist, having my own private remembrance of her. Isn't that something? That's the same piece she played on Top Tunes and New Talent when she was 17. So since I did the marker, that's why I thought, okay, in this book, I'm allowed to name her. That made me kind of part of the family in a way. I never could erase her. In a way, I could never stop loving her. I wanted to understand her. Vahe wanted so badly for us all to get together. Some other things happened in my life that also pulled the rug out under me. Like I said, I had this wonderful Berkeley family and a professor dad and a mom that worked in a therapeutic preschool. So it was all about keeping your emotions going. So I spent lots of time with them my whole life. Towards the end, mom had Alzheimer's. Dad was taking care of her. She passed of the Alzheimer's with the family not around her at the precise moment that she passed, but getting up to it, I sang to her and everything. And then spent every night with my dad, having to drive over to Alameda where he was living in a condo and back. And I got permission, by the way, to let this be in the book from my siblings. I wanted to check with them on this detail. The third night after my mom passed, my dad and I talked probably 5 or 6 hours straight, went out to dinner, went to his neighbors to look at paintings. As we're saying goodbye, I said something about, being adopted, there's always that fear that you're going to give me away. That's just one of those things in there. And he had kind of a smile. He had a wonderful, and we'd say goodbye. I'll see you tomorrow, Dad, at 11. That was the plan. We had that all planned. And I went off to San Francisco, had a great time with all of that. He called my sister to say what an great evening he had. And then somewhere in there, he took his own life. And my brother and I came upon him the next morning at like 11. So with that, all the rocks are gone. All the rocks are gone. And that's about 4 years ago. What I do want to say is this. I'm determined to continue to find happiness. And I want you to find happiness, my fellow adoptees and birth mothers and people in the adoption triangle, and those of you that are just listening to this. I loved all of these people, and I'm not going to stop loving them. Being with my daughters in any way, shape, or form, they're adults now, is everything. It means so much. And the realization that I'm not just my sorrow. I am more than that. I've conducted a lot of great pieces, professional orchestras, or the professional orchestra that I conduct, the Zion Chamber Orchestra. I've conducted Beethoven's Fifth. That's crazy. Conducted Beethoven's Seventh. I've done the Rachmaninoff Piano Concerto. As a horn player, I've been in this wonderful orchestra. Like I said, how I got any sound out, I'll never know. But wonderful experiences. Today was a fun teaching day. That stuff counts. That is also who I personally am. And I do a lot of hiking. I'm hiking everywhere. I've almost become sort of this little guide on Facebook once a week. Where did he go this time? Because since I don't have rehearsals because of COVID, that feels really good. But one of the most important things to me is literally this last hour and whatever it's been. If we started at 7 or whatever, in my case, 4:07. So what, about an hour and 13 minutes, and connecting with you folks and connecting with other people that have read the book. I've had so many heartfelt discussions with people in the book, with friends of mine, with people that I don't know so well, but maybe contact me. And that is so important. So hugs to all of us, and I wish you all happiness. And that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you so much, Paul, for this moving story and sharing your heart with all of us tonight. I think I speak for all of us. I mean, this is just you're truly an inspiration, and we all love you. And you're just a bright light, and you're what's needed in the community. We need to continue to share our stories. They are so powerful, and we can touch so many lives. And sometimes we don't even see the effect of a life that we touch. And it's just we're just so honored to have you with us tonight. I think you have beautiful comments in the chat room that we'll make sure that you receive a copy of, so you can see. I know there's plenty of questions out there that people would like to ask you, but your story was so powerful. I didn't want to interrupt. I think everybody will agree with me there. We just wanted you to continue. So we'll probably have to have you back, but I would like to say a few things that for those of you that are with us tonight, if you want to follow Paul, are you an Instagrammer? Are you Facebook?
I'm not much of anything. I'm on Facebook, just kind of regular old crazy Paul on Facebook, but I'm meeting a lot of adoptive people on there. Like, for example, you're a Facebook friend of mine.
Yeah.
Ann Hepburn is, so I love all that.
So make sure that you reach out to Paul on Facebook. I've read his book as well, so I'll be doing a review of this book, and we are going to be giving away an autographed copy. Paul's offered to, we'll do another drawing this evening. So everyone that's registered will have their name, and we'll pull a winner, and Paul will be contacting you to get your information. But it was just wonderful. And one thing I wanted to add, I don't know if you have the picture, because if you don't, you can share that from your book. Would you show everyone Wendy's grave marker? The way that was just so beautiful.
I'm going to make an attempt, because for you special people here, you get it in color. Marcie only has it in black and white.
Black and white, but it's so beautiful.
Oh, I appreciate that. Let me just, it's that whole thing where you're trying not to press the wrong button and you guys are all gone. But I still see you. You're still there. Hello, hello, hello.
We're still here.
Okay. I see Anne. Therefore, life is good right there. Okay, we've almost done this. Yeah, share screen. Share. Here it is.
There it is.
And I totally cleaned it off there, and that's my horn right there.
Yeah, I just thought you might want to share that.
Absolutely.
With everyone hearing the story tonight. But again, everybody, the book is We Are All Human Beings, an Adoptee Ponders. You can purchase this on Amazon, and then one of you will be our lucky winner tonight and get a copy of this. Thank you so much again, Paul. We really appreciate you being on this evening, and we look forward to seeing you again. And we hope you'll come back for more happy hour episodes. For those of you, I know we had some new attendees this evening. We hope you'll join us back. We're here every Friday night at 7 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Jennifer, do you have next week's guest? We can share real quick. Okay, next week we have Adam Pertman. A lot of you know who Adam is. He is the president of the National Center on Adoption and Permanency. He is an adoptive father, and he's been around educating and supporting adoptees for a very long time. He wrote an excellent book called Adoption Nation. And it was one of the most important books ever written on the subject. And Adam has just been a great supporter and a great friend to many of us. So I hope you'll join us next Friday, where we can spend some time with him. Anything else, Jen? We have any other announcements? We've got David Bowles well, we're going to talk about conference. For those of you that don't know, again, we do have an annual conference. It will be a hybrid this year. So it will be in person, and you can also virtually. Our two keynote speakers are our own David Bowl and Melanie Chung Sherman. So we've got 14 workshops and 2 days of fun, and we hope you'll check us out and see if you would be interested in joining us September 10th and 11th in Indianapolis. So anybody have any? We've got time for just a couple of quick questions for Paul. 5 minutes. If anybody wants to raise their hand or take themselves off mute. Anybody? They're quiet tonight.
Well, they've heard everything.
Yes, they did. Yes, they did.
I'll ask a question, Marcie.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Paul, this is Jamie Weiss. I just was curious if I never heard you mention anything about your adoptive parents and their reaction to your connecting with your birth parents.
They were fairly supportive, not 100%, but fairly supportive. One of the things that I think maybe I even got the information in terms of the search person, Neil, that I mentioned. Neil had said to my parents, or said that I could send my parents, who were living at the time, to the Alameda Center of Records, basically, and ask for the adoption information. And here's where it gets a little shady. He said, say something about, I don't know, but it was something so that they could possibly get a print of it, or take a look at it and take a picture of the microfiche. But my parents were trying to look at it and they just really couldn't see it very well. And so the clerk went, okay, I'll print everything out, including the names. So there was a lot of information on that. So yeah, they were supportive. Vahe met my dad a few times. But I generally didn't talk to them a lot about the other, because there's always sort of that feeling of I don't want to lose them. And anytime something would happen, like when I first met Wendy, I immediately then am kind of calling my parents up, hey, can I come over? You want to have a dinner? And always needed to run back to them. So that's kind of it. The book really helped with my own siblings to understand what had been going on, because these are not things I tended to bring up in casual conversation, you know, at Thanksgiving or something like that. So that kind of answers it.
Paul,
yes.
There's a really good question here. Patricia, will you take yourself off of mute? I'll let you ask the question.
Oh, sure. Thanks. I just put in the chat box. Have you ever taught music therapy for adoptees?
Good question.
Not specifically, but as a choir director, I've encountered a lot of foster care / adoptees as students, and they all know I'm adopted, and I've never opened myself that much like here, but enough that definitely spoken to them, related to them, helped them through their problems. And I'm in contact with lots of them now that have graduated.
That's great.
Yeah. Do you do that, Patricia, yourself?
Oh, no, I'm not musical at all, but I've heard of that as one way to possibly help adoptees, especially if they're, good at music or want to try it as a method for healing. So I'm always interested in anybody that's doing work like that, even if it's online.
Yeah. Like I said, it kind of comes with a job.
Right.
Yeah.
Good question. Very good question. Okay, well, I think that's a wrap for this evening, everybody. We appreciate you joining us again this evening. We hope to see you back next Friday. We want everybody to have a great weekend, and we appreciate you. And thanks again, Paul, for just an outstanding presentation.
Thank you, you guys.
We'll be uploading this and sharing it on YouTube so you can replay it or share it with your friends or and on social media. So thank you so much. Everybody have a great week.
Thank
Paul
you,
just
guys.
Thanks, Linda.
Thank you. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Linda. And I'll stay on, Marcie, so I can learn how to get a hold of whoever wins the copy of the book, etc.
Yeah, we'll wait till they.
What a beautiful set of people. You know?
Had 37.
Wow.
37.
Unbelievable. From all around the States, and then.
Yeah, we had Australia was here with us tonight.
Great. And
Yeah.
Canada, I think maybe there was a
Canada,
Canadian.
yeah, that's right. Canada was here. We had several from Canada. But yeah, you just did an excellent job.
Thank you.
I knew you would do it. I knew you would be fine. I knew you would. You just have that personality.
Mm.
Nothing to be nervous about.
No, it's just like having
We're all just people.
a drink in our living room and just
What, you know what really helps is just occasionally where a little chat comes by. And that just keeps you going.
Yeah.
And it's the right people to talk to.
yeah. Well, we just wanted to, again, personally thank you for coming on. What we're going to do, we'll have Jen pick someone